The latest and already lamplit series of films about the simple Peter Parker begins with his short biography. In Hypater, an ordinary kid from the common people, a baton and an easy loser, over whom, in addition to the hangers, it is not easier to mock even the driver in the buses, forcing him to run a kilometer cross, and most importantly, his heart, soul and pepper, from the first grade entirely, belong to my classmate Ridge, about whom he is attached at night with an extreme fantasy, instead of asking her out on a date, and that's when the years go by. Without a problem, please. And with all these weak characteristics, Valianoke Parker still somehow managed to make friends with the sons of Lurder, Harry Osborn, and still remains a loser and a shit to no one. When she and Harry, from the age of 15, had to spend patches on money, on the girls' clubs. They're just blockheads. But instead of hanging out, they have a tour of science centers, where Harry tells Peter to stop kneading his breasts, and rolled his leather balls to Mary. But all Parker dared to do was ask for a spot of Codio, although one compliment was enough for the speed with which Kirsten Dunst changes men to everyone, so that she would measure the length of the radius of the St. Petersburg hose in the evening. And I'm no longer able to watch, as Parker the moron goes to bed with the girls. One escaped genetically modified paycheck, decides to take pity on the guys, and gives him superpowers, so that at least with them Pietro became a normal kid. Parker, and there would be no running to the scientists of the laboratory. I'm screaming at the top of my lungs for him to be given an antidote. Super intellectual Parker hid his tongue in one place, and went home to the fathers of the boys. Solid deciding that if he's still breathing, after years of eating pasties from the transition, then Ocus and the crushed pulpit will definitely survive. Well, or he's just knocked up, because anyone knows that in one night he can't restore his vision, and not muscle mass will grow, and he reacts to this less than to the loss of the second sock, and I teach her in the nose how to smoke with a bump put on by Mary Jane. Instead of starting on the street, take her around the corner, and show all your changes. Super Benny, indecisive Parker gets up 10 meters away from her, and lets mumble to himself, a man has been created, it remains only to stir up a decent punching bag for him, who will establish Harry's father Norman Osborn, which, by order of the Ministry of Defense, develops exoskeletons and a scroll that turns people into a Captain of America, and when she started showing good results with Swarovka. We tried the inhalation of pores on heavy loads, the force increased by 800%, the military deer decided to terminate the contract, while the competitor's exoskeleton, a tin can compared to the glider, is useless, plus they do not develop a whistle, and the military bureaucrats withdraw the bat from a promising company, to pour them into the competitor's shit projects. I will deprive you of funding and hand over to Von Vem. This is a miracle, corruption will ruin it. And once I get a reputation and money, Norma Na decides to become a swamp rat. But why? Although I could find a drunkard on the street, and persuade a Hawthorne for a check on a plot of experimentation. Did the cool doctor not think that something could happen to him when the Severodka still carries a bunch of side effects, and he doesn't have a single ambulance team here? And in principle, what are they afraid of? Because if the Pentagon cuts off funding, you can fly to the land of eternal cold with all the technologies, take the money yourself, you know, from whom, and calmly refine the package. There is money. And the side effect of the Severodka is kind of strange, instead of the roof gone or the whole body paralyzed. The Normon acquires a capacity of 311 forces, and a second personality, multiplied by 10 times the rage, of all the console players in the world who bought Cyberpunk. And Stratum, over time, begins to turn into a man, due to the fact that Kirsten Dunst constantly looks at the men, and not at her feet, she slips, which Pika uses, and thus touches the girl for the first time. I am so glad his attic flowed so much that when I saw how half a ton is being clipped from his hands, there is no need to cut it off quietly with a knife, out of the blue, the grid of the local Gosporia. Benevolent abilities, unlike Parker, are not stupid, and allow them to get rid of the Flash, and become a new alpha at school, although from such a blow, the Flash would go into a coma, and Parker behind bars. Well, it's not enough, and for the first time you will feel a pleasant warmth in the body. From the beating of a person, Peter gives up on school, and runs to test new skeletons, and on the side tires like a monkey, having learned to let comp shots out of his hands. He also decides to slow down, though just how he will slow down, the simple Parker, of course, did not think. But hitting the wall does him good, and sets his brain a little, and meeting Mary, for the first time. Talking to a girl is difficult in separate words, but a pleasant conversation is interrupted by a flash with a new car, which acts on the mayor, like Valerian on cats. That clever child and swept away. Need a car. And that's it. And the dream of visiting Mary's chocolate shop makes Peter go to the underground Usi to cut down easy money for an iron horse. I'm making you a suit of riches to tie mine, and in a good way, and since I and Svapiki now do. It's stronger than leather, he makes a steroid freako without a problem. And when the bookie throws Parker on the grandmother, there is no reason to break his arm slightly. A super strong teenager just leaves, although truth and justice are on his side. Yes, if his strength would be enough for a couple of pliuas, give this goat to fork out. My uncle was also killed by a robber. Today is not Parker's day. But the thirst for blood quickly squeezes the brains of the captain, and he is already with the cops on the shave, leading the pursuit of the freak. And like a true intellectual, he jumps on the car and closes the criminal's view so that he turns onto the sidewalk and begins to crush people. I didn't even think that the freak would open fire on him. And this is when he does not yet know how strong his body is. It will cope with a piece of lead at a speed of 150 meters per second. And when he does make Bondo stop, he lets him hide in the building, instead of beating him up in a second and handing him over to the police. And when the plant is already surrounded by cops, he can't deny himself the pleasure of wasting a meme and playing with the victim. It would be better to spend this time to properly break all the limbs of a goat, who is guilty of the death of a loved one, and a well-off bully, instead of shooting a student, persuades him to sit down, and so that Parker does not become a murderer, the director has arranged a number of dirty tricks, which work to criminalize himself at Coco Shell. Well, dead, letter Parker is clean. Perfect. After burying his uncle, graduating from school, and dropping liters of tears, Parker decides to catch Bondos in honor of Ain Colben. However, hope to fuck, if only they would write about him in the newspapers. After all, when so many crimes happen in New York in one day, that he would not have time to prevent them even with a turbojet engine on his tailbone. He has enough time to go to a job interview and do nothing at home. And the new proof that Parker would not hurt to drink vitamin, which increases brain activity, is that the only way to earn money on which he had enough mind. It's a loophole to sell pictures on the Uka to the newspaper, when I could participate in legal, even illegal fights, become a champion, release my booze, and have so many dollars in my pockets that I could chew at least one place. Well, a kind of scientist, in the truest sense of the word, burns out the goods of the competitors of the cheese market, which does not prevent a few from redeeming the insult, and sending Norman to 3 Soviet ones, and due to the fact that Parker has plenty of free time, he does not take off himself in a suit to sell pictures on the UK to all available newspapers and magazines, and he goes to the carnival, where he draws that his beloved Swallow has started dating the best tent, and if Mary is a handsome man who has coddled a rich man, then Gare is still a rat, he has cheated in a girl, into whom his beloved friend has swaddled, although with his babos he could afford any other New York steal. I don't know myself. Like his father, who decided to use a miracle grenade to kill the shareholders together with his own son, and when the job is done, and the shareholders can be handed over to the anatomical museum, Osbar for some kind of horseradish decides to hit on a friend of his son, who we didn't fit into the horseradish, and this is when we need to dump. While the cops did not call for air support, and only Osborne Sr. decided to find a young calf. As he removed my women with a cry, Parker appears, but because of the mother's hole, who could not take her child. A minute ago, when the first explosion thundered, the pay loses the chance to finish off the green, and flies saving a pussy. The cops, of course, cattle, and go into the hands of the terrorists in the past, which Parker immediately joins, because instead of winding up the green with a half-ass, he hammers into an armored helmet, and because of the actions of this and the bathhouse Deebnet the first onlookers, who still for some reason have all run away from here, and apparently Norman is also a fan of stealing the budget, he can't aim properly without pointing a glider, and the missiles, weaker than we have in Advar on New Year's Eve, are immediately voiced by his beloved, whom Peter has not yet removed from the balcony, although after he kicked the green one for the first time, his favorite girl in the rescue should have had a priority. He looked around and looked for where to save some rookie. As a result, the goblin intercepts the cobweb, and starts playing with him in Brokeback Mountain. But since Peter is a straight man, he quickly interrupts his cleaning, and only lets go of the green in his ASEA, when sure it could snarl him with a web. Stop driving. Well, Colt Parker thinks only about his future sex, and even when he saw Mary Jane, turned on by a spider, just flies away. They take her to the nearest roof, under the pretext of thanking her for saving. Oh, what is he doing? In order to be constantly online, the goblin seems personal to Norman, and since he got very excited after close contact with Peter, then decides to urgently call a young elastic boy and a partner. If you teach him in an ally, imagine, it will be fun. Well, a lucky chance brings the heroes of the Daily Bugle editorial office together, but since Pika has an exacerbation of the break syndrome, he forgets that you need to immediately attack the enemy, and not to mark it, for which the goblin immediately sings a lullaby to him. Somehow it doesn't get prettier. Goblin gives the break a couple of days to work on his proposal to unite in tandem and falls off, and while Polcho was out for several hours in a blackout, the green one didn't even take off his mask out of isobonal curiosity, to find out what kind of oaf he was holding up. Oh, what are you going to do here anyway? But Parker certainly doesn't have time to think about Goblin's offer, as well as to try to find him. It is much more important to rub yourself in the sight of your beloved without result. Before handing her over from the circular carousel in the gateway, and when all the stars have converged, the girl is ready to thank the savior herself. Parker spends a chance Seleno and dumps, when he could come down to earth and right here we are Regine, animate all the pictures from Kamasutru. And Vinceman, really what a Mac. The time of the year has come out, and the goblin lures Parker to the fire, and as a friendly greeting, with a decent blow he hits the ridge. What are you, friendship, the blow must be kept. After that, he uses some kind of casting finagles, because he had shrapnel and bearing grenades, in a single copy, and when Parker made progress in fucking not a goblin, he just dumped instead of sending him home, and after a couple of hours, Osborne, as if nothing had happened, is having an idle Thanksgiving. Although, when Parker comes to the party, it becomes clear that the goblin has finally brainwashed him, because while undressing in the room, he did not threaten to put plasterer on early. Norman freaks out from this situation, that his son's friend is his enemy, and goes home, to come up with a plan to quickly soak the pest. Plus, at the same time scanning Mary, he lays out Gory on the shelves, who she is and why she is meeting with him. They are all very cute, and as soon as they manage to grab their money, they will immediately show their hair. And having heard such a theory about herself, Mary understands that it will not work with hugging. Therefore, he throws him, yes, into Parker's first hope. Everything is going well, everything is going for Ibat. And it becomes very interesting, what the goblin was doing with the song, when he was unconscious for several hours here. His Moronism was transmitted to Norman, in some way. Instead of quietly eliminating Parker on the street, he decides to bring Aunt May to a heart attack, so that Pika with their Cossacks stabbed in the heart. And this one, when he found out that Taitu May was attacked by a green, Postroshny yellow gas. He knows everything about me. There is no need to dig up any information, to figure out who is hiding under the mask of a goblin, and break all his ribs, that leave Steedy. Without thinking that Green would find out the room, number and send a couple of air-to-ground missiles to visit them. And the only good thing, is that Mary realized, that she could not live a day without a man, and she begins to roll with him. The truth is burning them, and so conveniently merges this in Fubuki. She's in love with Parker? And he still did not give up the idiotic idea, of killing Parker morally, and not a bullet in the head. And when Pika thought with his Megamos, that the green one could get to his beloved, he ran to call her, but the goblin had already come to her on the tea shelf. And a person in my opinion, how does he go out to play? I wonder how long Osborne would have waited for Peter's call from Mary, when he could have taken his number from Harry and scored the pay mess arrow. And as usual, Peter Parker went to deal with a dangerous type, forgetting to put his brain in his head. After all, if he knew that he would definitely wave, he did not call the TBR, so that they evacuated the area, and even better, they would have shot down a flying terrorist in Tazirka. And thanks to this genius, a lot of people die, and besides Mary, the children of the trailers are also taken hostage. And if Pietro couldn't invite us to see a girl for 10 years, then it's not surprising that he failed to tell the Green not to send Mary and the children to the evening training, and apparently he has practiced such a maneuver more than once, since without a mistake, he saves his girlfriend, and manages to intercept the car. Oh, that's Kirsten Dunst's grip. To see such a strong palm, trained on dates with guys. But Osborne stirred up such a cool plan, to put the Uka in a full ass. For a few minutes he disappears somewhere, allowing the Parker to get out of that very ass. And when Green, I still decided to bring a replenishment program, liquidations, fucking in the United States, the trajectory of his glider is changed by a brick, thrown from the bridge by the fans, who have not yet run away, who is where, since we see blind, and did not see how the goblin a minute ago, everything here was carried by rockets, and can easily send a couple to visit them. Well, as it is known, Parker's brain lies somewhere in a basket with a dirty bill. After he put the car on the ferry, he continued to hang on the halfway, waiting for the Pistrina to arrive. And the goblin crawled along with the bits, since he did not dare to put Parker on the glider, for the second time, which also has machine guns, and you can make friendly distances out of a payday. And that's it, plus Parker is lucky that he sewed a resistant suit for himself, and he, without any consequences, can tolerate a grenade explosion in centimeters of the face, a grenade that can destroy entire floors. You can see with a suit, the best Shyaga Livuta helped. Glad to meet you. And does the goblin really have nothing more to spend his time on? How to risk Parker's face, when he came out here after the grenade explosion?